They wanted me to feel lucky just for being invited. That was the thing nobody ever said out loud, but I felt it every single time I walked through my in-laws' front door. The way my mother-in-law would look at me, not with cruelty exactly, but with this very specific kind of patience, the kind you give a stray dog you've agreed to tolerate. Like she was doing me a favor by learning my name. My husband and I had been together for 3 years before we got engaged. 3 years of holiday dinners where I sat at the far end of the table. 3 years of his sister getting the good china and me getting a paper plate at the 4th of July cookout. Not literally, but close enough that the memory still burns. His family had money. Old money, the kind that doesn't announce itself but makes you feel the absence of it on yourself the second you walk into a room. Their house in Fairfield County had a proper name, not a street address, a name. I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment in Akron, Ohio, where my mom worked double shifts at the hospital and my dad drove for FedEx. I wasn't ashamed of that, I never was. But they made it very clear they were. When my husband, I'll call him my husband because that's what he is, what he always was, even when his family couldn't see it. When he told them we were getting married, his mother smiled the way people smile when they hear bad news they'd already predicted. His father shook his hand and said very quietly, "Are you sure about this?" Not to me. To him. Like I wasn't standing right there in their foyer with my coat still on. His sister, who I'll call exactly what she was, the one who always had an opinion, pulled him aside that same evening. I was in the kitchen pretending to admire their backsplash when I heard her say, "She's sweet, but she's not our kind of person, you know." And the worst part wasn't what she said. The worst part was the pause before he answered. He did answer, the right way eventually, but that pause lived inside me for a long time. We started planning the wedding on our own budget. We weren't poor. My husband was a high school science teacher and I was a registered nurse working in the ICU at a hospital in New Haven. We made decent money. We just didn't have generational wealth sitting in a trust somewhere waiting to be spent on a ballroom and a 6-piece orchestra. We found a beautiful barn venue about 40 minutes outside the city. String lights, wildflowers. A catering company run by a woman who had been cooking for 30 years and whose food made you close your eyes. We were proud of what we'd put together. I was proud of it. His mother was not. She came to the venue walkthrough uninvited. I still don't know how she found out about the appointment. She walked in wearing a cashmere coat in April, looked around the space for exactly 45 seconds, and said, "Well, it's rustic." The way she said it, rustic, like the word itself was a generous substitute for something far less kind. She pulled me aside while my husband was talking to the venue manager and she said, with perfect composure, "I want you to understand something. Our family has a reputation in this community. We have hosted events at the Westport Country Club for 40 years. I'm not saying you have to do the same thing, I'm just saying that people will talk." She let that sit there between us. Then she added, "I hope you won't take this the wrong way." I took it exactly the right way. The invitations went out in January, 200 people. My side was smaller, my mom, my aunt, a handful of cousins, my 2 best friends from nursing school. His side was a production. Country club friends, business associates, the same people who'd been going to their holiday parties since before my husband was born. His mother sent a separate note to several of them, I found out later, suggesting that they might want to manage their expectations for the event. One of her friends actually called my mother-in-law after receiving the invitation to confirm the location because she assumed there had been a typo. There was no typo. 3 weeks before the wedding, his sister texted me. Not called, texted. It said, "Hey, so I've been thinking and I'm not sure I can make it. It's a really busy time of year for us and honestly the drive is kind of long. I hope you understand. 40 minutes. The drive was 40 minutes. She lived in Greenwich. His mother called that same afternoon to let me know she and his father would try to make the ceremony but couldn't commit to the reception. His father said nothing. He rarely did. I sat on the edge of our bed that night and I read those messages over and over. My husband sat next to me and held my hand and didn't say the right thing because there was no right thing to say. At some point I put my phone face down on the nightstand and I thought, okay, I see who you are now. I see it completely. I didn't cry. I want to be clear about that. I did not cry. What I did instead was call my mom. She answered on the second ring the way she always does and I told her everything. There was a long silence and then she said, "Baby, let them skip it. The day is yours. Don't give them any more of it." I have carried those words with me every single day since. The morning of the wedding was October and it was perfect. Not perfect in the way magazines use that word. perfect in the way that morning light on an old barn looks, the way it catches the wood and makes everything gold. My two best friends helped me into my dress, which I'd found at a consignment bridal shop in Hamden for $380 and altered myself. It was simple and it was beautiful and it was mine. My husband's parents arrived 11 minutes before the ceremony began. His sister did not come at all. They sat in the back row. His mother was wearing black, which I noticed immediately. Not funeral black, she'd probably say, but black. The ceremony was everything. My mom walked me down the aisle, which hadn't been the original plan, but my dad had passed 4 years earlier and I wanted her beside me. When the officiant pronounced us married, the barn erupted, not a polished, restrained country club eruption, but a real one. Loud. Joyful. My best friend stood up and whooped. His mother pressed her lips together. The reception was better than the ceremony. We had a local bluegrass band that could also pivot to Beyoncé, which they did twice, and both times the floor was full. The food was unbelievable. My aunt made her coconut cake that people are still talking about. We danced until 11 o'clock. His parents left at 6:45. I watched them go from across the room. His mother paused at the door and looked back once, and I made sure to be looking directly at her when she did. I smiled. She did not. On the drive home, my new husband reached over and took my hand and said, "That was the best day of my life." I believed him completely. What happened over the next 18 months is the part of the story that even now I have trouble fitting into words, because it sounds like something someone made up. But I was there for all of it, and I have the emails to prove it. My husband had spent the last several years developing a curriculum model for STEM education that he'd been quietly building on the side. He'd started it as a passion project, something he worked on after his students went home, something he genuinely believed could change how science was taught in underfunded schools. He'd partnered with a friend from college who had a background in education technology, and together they'd spent 3 years building it into something real. I knew about it. I'd watched him at the kitchen table at 11 o'clock at night, laptop open, completely absorbed, and I believed in it the way I believe in things that matter, quietly, without fanfare. In March, 14 months after our wedding, they signed a licensing agreement with one of the largest education publishing companies in the country. I cannot give you the exact number because the details of the deal are still partly confidential, but I will tell you that when my husband called me from the parking lot outside the law office where the papers were signed, he was crying. I had never heard him cry before that moment, not once. The number had 8 figures, early 8 figures, but 8 figures. We did not change our lives overnight. That is the part that matters. We stayed in New Haven. My husband went back to his classroom on Monday morning. I went back to my unit at the hospital. We talked for weeks about what to do, what it meant, what we wanted. We bought a house, a real house, not a mansion but a house, in a neighborhood where we already had friends. We set up a college fund for our nephew, whose parents had never been unkind to me. We donated to the hospital's pediatric wing. We lived our lives. The call came from my mother-in-law on a Tuesday evening in late April. She called my cell phone, which was unusual, because she almost always called my husband. I let it ring twice before I answered, because I needed 2 seconds to arrange my face even though she couldn't see it. "I've been thinking about you," she said. "About us, about how things have been." Her voice had a different quality than I was used to, softer, more careful. "I'd love to have you both for dinner soon. I have something I'd like to discuss," I said. "Of course, let me check with him and we'll find a time." She did not bring up the wedding. She did not apologize. She talked about wanting to be closer and more present, and she used the word family 3 times in under 2 minutes. She mentioned that her husband had been talking about investments lately, about wanting to diversify. She's mentioned it very casually, the way people mention things they want you to not notice they're mentioning. I thanked her for calling and told her I'd be in touch. I sat with the phone in my lap for a long time after that. My husband's sister texted 2 days later. Not about the dinner, specifically about a business idea she'd been working on, a boutique event planning company, her words, and whether we might want to chat. She'd heard things, she said. Through the family grapevine, she wanted to reconnect. She added a heart emoji, which I do not think she'd ever sent me before in 4 years of knowing her. 3 weeks after that, at a family birthday party for my husband's nephew, his brother's son, a good kid, turned 8. I sat across from my mother-in-law at the kitchen table while the children ran in the backyard, and she looked at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before, something that might have been remorse or might have been calculation. "I have still not fully decided," she said. "I want to be honest with you. I wasn't sure about you at first. She said it like this was a revelation, like I hadn't known, like I hadn't felt it in every stiff hug and every loaded comment about the barn venue and every empty chair at my reception. I think I let some things get in the way, she said. Class things, which I'm not proud of. She was proud of saying she wasn't proud of it, that was the thing. The confession was its own performance. I looked at her for a moment. I thought about my mom on the phone the night before the wedding. I thought about my dress from the consignment shop. I thought about the black coat at the ceremony. I thought about my father-in-law asking my husband, not me, my husband, "Are you sure about this?" I said, "I appreciate you saying that." And then I said, "I need to be honest with you too. I don't think dinner is something we can do right now. We're in a really full season of life, a lot going on. I hope you understand." I used her words. I hope you understand. I did it on purpose. She blinked. Of course, and reached for her coffee cup, and the subject was closed. On the way home, my husband glanced over at me from the driver's seat. He'd heard all of it. The kitchen isn't very big. He said, "You okay?" I said, "I'm better than okay," and I was. I genuinely was. His sister followed up twice more about the event planning idea. I responded each time with warmth and nothing useful. After the second response, she stopped texting. His father emailed my husband once asking about opportunities to connect. His exact phrasing, like a LinkedIn message, and my husband replied politely and without specifics. We were not cruel, we were not vindictive. We did not post anything online or tell anyone a single thing that made them look bad. We did not need to. The gap between who they'd assumed I was and who I turned out to be was doing all the work on its own. What I will tell you is this: the moment that stays with me, the one I come back to when I need to remind myself what I know. It happened at Christmas, about 8 months after my mother-in-law's phone call. We hosted Christmas at our house for the first time. My mother drove up from Akron. My husband's brother and his wife and the 8-year-old came, which was lovely. My husband's parents were invited. I want to be clear about that. We did invite them. They came. His mother walked into our house and was quiet for a moment. Not rude, just quiet. She stood in the living room and looked around at the space we'd made, the bookshelves full of things we actually read, the photos on the wall of our actual life, the tree we'd decorated with a mix of ornaments from both of our childhoods. And she said, with what I think was genuine feeling, "It's a beautiful home." I said, "Thank you. We love it." And she nodded, and something crossed her face that I don't have a word for, and then the kids came running in and the moment passed and we all sat down to dinner. She helped clear the dishes after. She'd never done that before. Not at their house, not anywhere. She stacked plates without being asked and carried them to the kitchen, and when I came in to start the rinsing, she handed me things one at a time, quietly, and at some point she said, "You're a good cook," which from her was a sentence that probably cost something to say. I thanked her. I meant it. I didn't forget anything. I want to be honest about that because I think it matters. Forgiveness is a word people use to mean different things, and what it means to me is that I don't carry it around in my chest anymore, that hot, tight thing, it's not there. But I also know exactly what happened, and I know exactly who showed up for me and who didn't, and I know that information in a way that is permanent and quiet and mine. My mother-in-law does not know what we're worth. We've never told her. She's made guesses. I've seen it in her eyes when she looks at the house, when she calculates, but she doesn't know. And I've decided she doesn't need to, because whatever number she arrives at, that's the number she's responding to. Not me. She never quite learned to respond to me. I sat in my living room on a Sunday morning not long ago, still in pajamas, coffee going cold next to me, and I was looking at our wedding photo on the wall. The one from the barn. String lights, wildflowers, my mom on my arm, my husband's face just absolutely broken open with happiness. And I thought about the black coat in the back row, and the sister who didn't come, and the venue manager who'd fielded a call asking if there was a typo in the address. And I thought, they missed it. They actually missed it. Not the wedding. The whole thing. They were so busy calculating what I was worth that they completely missed who I was. And by the time they looked up from their calculations, we had already built the life, and the door they'd left propped open with their quiet contempt had swung shut on its own without anyone having to touch it. My phone buzzed on the cushion next to me. It was my husband, from the other room, being ridiculous. "You want more coffee?" I typed back, obviously. A few seconds later, he appeared in the doorway with both mugs, still in his socks, and he handed mine over and sat down, and we looked out the window at the November yard, at the oak tree we'd already decided not to take down even though everyone said we should. I didn't need to say anything out loud, But I thought it clearly, we are exactly where we are supposed to be, and we got here on our own, and that is something nobody can recalculate.